Hello Tributes and welcome to part 3 of the 190th Hunger Games. Before I start, I'd yet again like to thank Andrew McLean for making some of the art featured in this video. I would also like to thank Christian Blanco and Laura McCouch, who wrote Tales of the Hunger Games and Pen and Reborn. I know I said this in the other two parts, but like without them this series would not exist, so kinda have to give them props where props is due. So yeah, even if it's like multiple times in one day, is I'm recording part 1, part 2, part 3 on the same day. That's why I said I'll post them later. I didn't say like, oh, I'll post them next week. I'll post them later. And this is later. So yeah, but anyways, just wanted to thank them. Now let's get into part 3 by talking about what happened previously in part 2. Before the Hunger Games even starts, Atrophilia from 4 kills River from 4 during a major argument before getting shot to death by by peacekeepers, knocking District 4 out of the competition entirely. The Hunger Games start the next day, and tributes aren't surprised that the pair from 4 were not there, considering a lot of the tributes saw River fall past their balcony. Other tributes who were housed in rooms above District 4's room heard River's screams and the gunshots from peacekeepers. Back outside the arena, Districts 3, 5, 8, 9, and 11, or 6, 8, 9, and 11, broke into intense rebellion and riots. This time, the riots could not be easily quelled until certain conditions were met. The conditions were that the surviving 8 would be taken out of the arena and disused caves would be ended. To everyone's surprise, the capital agreed to this. The final 8, which consisted of Treasure from 1, Eliana from 2, Trevor from 2, Andrew from 8, Tia from 10, Tio from 10, Mercy Elizabeth from 12, and Hopper from 12, were then quickly picked up and moved out of the arena. The capital then agreed that they'd end this year's games once the riots were stopped and the leaders were placed in the custody of the capital. Once this occurred, however, the leaders were secretly assassinated by President Pontus Vesta and head peacekeepers. After a few weeks, however, Pontus gave the survivors a choice. This choice was very reminiscent of the victor's choice back before the 76th Hunger Games. The survivors had the choice to either move to the capital and not go back into the games, or they would be sent back into the games to do the finale for the 190th games. Each of the survivors were put into separate rooms with their parents and a peacekeeper, so that the survivors wouldn't impact each other's decisions. Treasure, Eliana, and Trevor unsurprisingly chose to go back into the arena. In Andrew's room, he and his mom talked for a while about his choice. Andrew didn't want to hurt his girlfriend if he were to die in the games, but he also wanted to avenge his best friend and make sure she didn't die for nothing. Andrew ended up signing the paper to go back into the games. He was then taken by a peacekeeper to the accommodation tower. In Tia's room, she and her mother talked for ages about her decision. Tia wanted to bring more victory to District 10, but her mother didn't want to lose her, just in case she wasn't able to beat her competition. Although her mom almost changed her mind, Tia still ended up signing the paper to go back into the games. In Tio's room, he talked with his dad about the decision he was going to make. The pair talked about the victor's choice and the possibility that the choice could be the same. The pair decided not to risk it, and Tio's dad nodded to him as he signed the paper to go back into the games. In Mercy Elizabeth's room, she talked with her sister Angel for ages about her decision. Angel didn't want her to move to the capital, saying she knew that this was going to be like the victor's choice. She just knew. This, however, did not change Mercy Elizabeth's mind. She had seen how bloodthirsty Tia and Tio were, and didn't want to return to the arena with them. So, Mercy Elizabeth decided to sign the paper to move to the capital, to the surprise of everyone in the room. Finally, in Hopper's room, he chatted with Kyler and Tyler for a bit about his decision. Kyler and Tyler didn't want to lose Hopper, but they also didn't like the looks of the papers. Kyler and Tyler ended up trying to talk Hopper into returning to the arena, but he had already made up his mind. Hopper also ended up signing the paper to move to the capital. It was then revealed by President Pontus Vesta, who signed what? He then stated that the people who signed to move to the capital will have 3 tributes of their same gender reaped next year in the 191st Hunger Games. This caused outrage in District 12, as both of the survivors to sign to move to the capital were from there, meaning that 6 tributes would be reaped unless District 12 was picked to send the extra tribute. Then there'd be 7 tributes from District 12 next year. Meanwhile, all the districts of the survivors assigned to go back into the games were glad that they made the choice they did. It was revealed that the finale of the 190th Hunger Games was going to be held in the old amphitheater, where the 1st through 10th Hunger Games and the 76th Hunger Games were held. When Treasure, Eliana, Trevor, Andrew, Tia, and Tio were lifted into the old amphitheater, Tia and Tio actually signed to Andrew to help them take down Treasure, Eliana, and Trevor. To the surprise of most, Andrew actually agreed to this, thinking that Treasure, Eliana, and Trevor had something to do with Yara's death. When the gong sounded, all 6 of the survivors ran in and grabbed weapons. Andrew grabbed a sword and ran at Trevor, stabbing him in the throat, just as he had grabbed a knife. He repeatedly stabbed Trevor until his cannon sounded. Meanwhile, Tia ran in and grabbed a scythe. She then ran at Treasure and swung her scythe through the air, slicing open Treasure's calf. Treasure, full of anger, swung her sword through the air, but Tia ducked under it and sliced her scythe up into Treasure's throat, and she fell to the ground and her cannon sounded. Finally, Tio ran in and grabbed a scythe as well. He then ran at Eliana, who was actually having problems finding a weapon she could use. When Tio got to Eliana, he grabbed her hair and pulled her to him, stating that it was time to get Eliana back. Tio dropped Eliana and sliced her leg open with his scythe. Eliana screamed out and looked around. Even though she couldn't see, she hoped to get mercy from Tio. Andrew noticed this and felt bad for Eliana as Tio grabbed Eliana by the hair again and ripped it off of Eliana's head. At this point, Andrew realized it was actually the fault of the Tens that Yara was dead. He watched as Tio delivered the killing blow to Eliana with his scythe. Andrew then ran at Tio and stabbed his sword through his neck. Tio fell to the ground with his cannon sounding. Andrew then glared at Tia. Tio stood looking around, not knowing where the fight had just happened. Everything was quiet, almost too quiet. All Tia could hear were the birds tweeting around her. Just then, she started to hear fast footsteps approaching her, but before she could react, she felt his sword stabbed through her back. Just then, Andrew used his sword to lift Tia into the air and flip her over him, bashing her head against the ground. Andrew then stomped on Tia's throat hard with his boot. Tia started to choke as Andrew smirked. For the first time in the games, he actually spoke. For Yara, Andrew said before stabbing Tia in the neck, watching her squirm around, choking on her own blood. When her cannon sounded, the entirety of Panem went eerily silent for 5 seconds before the entirety of Panem broke into cheers. Even the careers cheered for the boy. The deaf citizens in Panem cheered the loudest, after proof that they could win, too, was given to them via this boy. Meanwhile, Andrew didn't know he had won until peacekeepers came in to collect him and put him on the hovercraft. In the hovercraft, everything was quiet. Andrew went back to his silent communication, only using sign language in order to communicate. As he was taken back to the capital, Andrew noticed Mercy Elizabeth and Hopper in the hovercraft with him. Although Andrew was too tired to do anything about it, he did thank the pair from 12 for not going back into the games, citing that the decision they made is probably what saved his life. Mercy Elizabeth and Hopper didn't notice that Andrew was trying to talk to them until a peacekeeper told them what Andrew had signed. The pair then gasped at this realization that Andrew was trying to talk to them, before signing to Andrew that they just didn't want to return because of how scared they had become of Tia and Tio. The trio then continued to talk together, with Andrew actually speaking while Tia and Tio used sign language to communicate to Andrew. It was apparently a required subject in school back in District 12 to learn sign language. For his victor's interview, Andrew wore a purple tuxedo. Andrew walked onto the stage to the sound of loud applause, although he couldn't hear it himself. Mia and Tia Flickerman smiled at Andrew and shook his hand before taking a seat with him. The Flickerman twins asked Andrew things like how he felt about his victory and how he felt when the peacekeepers took him out of the arena. He answered all these questions to the best of his ability until Mia made the mistake of asking Andrew how he felt about after Yara died. The rest of the interview was spent with Andrew angrily glaring at Mia until he excused himself from the stage and left. After Andrew returned home, he moved into a houseboat on the shores of Lake Ontario. He and Ramona broke up for a few months after Ramona got extremely mad that Andrew even entertained Yara's crush on him. Although eventually Andrew managed to talk Ramona down and the two got back together. The pair would get married after the 193rd Hunger Games and would go on to have 5 kids together, 3 girls and 2 boys. The eldest of the boys, being named Yarrow, ends up being the only one of Andrew's children to compete in a future games, and he ends up getting runner-up in that games. Meanwhile, when Mercy Elizabeth and Hopper moved to the capital, Mercy Elizabeth and Hopper were told that they could travel back and forth between District 12 and the capital. Mercy Elizabeth and Hopper would travel to District 12 once, but when both of them were alienated for chickening out of the 190th Hunger Games, they never went back. After Mercy Elizabeth killed herself and Hopper married Clarissa and changed his last name, Kyler, Tyler, and Eraslo were the last hope of continuing the Horowitz last name. After all 3 of them died in future games, though, the Horowitz family dynasty ended. Hopper ended up having 6 kids with Clarissa. One of these kids, with the permission of Clarissa, of course, was named after his sister. Mercy Rose would go on to be one of the best stylists in the capital at the age of 15. She would become the District 9 stylist during the 205th Hunger Games. Meanwhile, after Abreva Heidemann wins the future games, Hopper told Abreva and Asion about the death of Mercy Elizabeth, and so the pair decided to name their first daughters after Mercy Elizabeth, Asion naming his Mercy Sophia Blanken, and Abreva naming his Mercy Lily Heidemann. Mercy Sophia would go on to be an amazing teacher in the District 12 Training Academy. Meanwhile, Mercy Lily would go on to live a quiet life with her father until marrying a capital boy named Tobias Flickerman Jr. and moving to the capital. Mercy Lily and Tobias Jr. would go on to have 9 kids together, all of which would be big, prominent figures within Panem. Interviewers, vice presidents, mayors, stylists, capital appointed mentors, and even performers. Andrew, Mercy Elizabeth, and Hopper would become close friends, and after Mercy Elizabeth's death, Andrew would be in the front row during her funeral. Andrew would remain there for Hopper until death, the pair having become like brothers. Andrew was the last person that Hopper expected to be his friend, but he was happy Andrew was there. So yeah, guys, that is the end of the 190th Hunger Games. I hope you guys enjoyed it. In the next video I do will be the 191st through 194th Hunger Games. And the 195th Hunger Games will also canonically be split into multiple parts. Again, there's a reason for that. It's a different reason than it was for this one, though. Because this one just, I put major turning points for the games at either the end of a part or the beginning of a part. Like, for instance, there wasn't really a major turning point at the end of part 1, so we're not gonna really do that. The part 1 was just the pre-games. Part 2 began with the death of both District 4 tributes, and part 3 began with the extraction of the survivors, only for them to go back in for the finale. So that's kind of why I split this one into 3 parts. But 195 will be split into multiple parts, probably not 3, unless I decide to do 3, but I don't think I will. But it will be split into multiple parts in order to have the Quell make more sense. So, yeah, but that's the end of the 190th Hunger Games. It's the end of episode 7. Next episode, episode 8, will be the 191st through 194th games. So yeah, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, then slap that like button. As always, stay awesome. Goodbye, everybody.